I want to talk about something today that nobody really talks about when they tell their moving abroad story. Everyone tells you about the excitement, the adventure, the moment the plane took off and they felt free. The new city, the new language, the new life unfolding in front of them like something out of a movie. And all of that is honestly real. I promise you. All of that is real. But there's a part of the story that usually gets left out. The part that happened before any of that. The part that happened in my apartment. I had the most beautiful apartment at that time, and I want you to understand that what I mean when I say that, I don't just mean it was a nice place to live. What I mean is it was a beautiful place. No one lived in there. It was completely new. I had a wonderful gym that was just downstairs. I could have access to 2 jacuzzis, a beautiful pool, and a wonderful balcony that I got to sit out during the wonderful summers. And it really created like it was mine. I had built it into something that like really felt like me. The way the light came in the morning, the way that it smelled with my favorite kind of candle, which was eucalyptus, the way I felt when I walked through the door after a long day, and it just held me. Well, long day of soccer, really. I love that apartment. The way you love something that has been witness to an entire chapter of your life. And for that moment, I was leaving it. Not because I had to, not because something had gone wrong or fallen apart, but because I had chosen to. Because something in me knew it was time. Because the next version of my life was waiting somewhere else, and I had finally said yes to her. And I want to tell you what that actually felt like, because it did not feel the way I expected to. It honestly felt like grief. I think we have a very confused relationship with grief in this culture. We think grief is only for things we lost against our will, death, breakups, ending that were forced on us. We don't have much language for the grief that comes from choosing to leave something, from outgrowing something, from saying yes to the next thing while still being in love with the current thing. But that grief is real, and it deserves to be named. I remember that time when I was leaving the apartment, when I was in my city where I went to university and whatnot. I was all over the place emotionally, honestly. I remember walking with one of my girlfriends, and I was just like a hot mess. And I remember just being excited, genuinely deeply excited, the kind of excited that makes you feel like your body can't contain it. And I was emotional. Crying random moments, standing in my kitchen, just looking outside the window and just, I don't know, just feeling it all at once. And I really felt off, really off. Like my nervous system didn't know what frequency to be on, because I was simultaneously ending one life and beginning a whole nother chapter in life, and there was no clean line between the two. And here's what I want to say about all of those feelings. Every single one of them was right. There was no wrong way to feel what I was feeling. I didn't need to be more excited or less sad or more certain or less emotional. I just needed to let it all be there. But here's what I didn't fully understand in those moments than what I understand now, is that what I was really grieving wasn't just the apartment. It was what I was growing to become, or who I was in that environment. I was grieving a version of myself. The version of myself that had lived in an apartment, who had built that life, who had the routines figured out, that went grocery shopping in the same stores, that had the routines to go to my gym that I did my daily workouts in, the places that I would know the routes to on Sunday, soccer. She's been really real, and she had been mine, and she had gotten me to exactly that point where I was ready for something more. And I was so afraid and just really sad leaving her behind. As I mentioned, I had such a whole routine in my life, and it felt good, and it also felt off at the very same time. There's something profoundly bittersweet about outgrowing a version of yourself that you actually loved, that you were proud of, that really matched you perfectly until it didn't. My question for you, my reflection question for you is there a version of yourself you're already grieving even before you left? A chapter you can feel closing even if you haven't turned the page yet? What does that grief feel like in your body? I want to take you to a moment when I was at my apartment one of the last nights, and I just remember my things were everywhere, was scattered and all over the place, and my mind was just also all over the place, and the space felt full and empty at the same time. Just looking around, seeing everything cluttered, knowing that things were out of place, and knowing that I was also going to be out of place very soon. And I just sat in the middle of it, not to do anything, just to be there, just to let myself feel the full weight of what I was doing. And I had a conversation with myself that I really think about often. Not out loud, not even really in words. It was more like a reckoning, a little sitting with, looking at each other, the woman I had been and the woman I was becoming, and just acknowledging each other before one of them had to go. I thought about everything in that apartment that it held. The hard nights, the good mornings, the dinners with friends, the solo evenings when I was able to sit on my balcony and allow the moon to give me a little bit of light to oversee the city. It was quiet inside, and it was exactly what I needed. The moment of doubt and the moments of certainty and all the ordinary, unremarkable Tuesday nights that I would never get back and somehow already miss. The moments where I hosted people, where I had parties and events in the community room, it really felt like home to me that I just wasn't ready to leave. And at the same time, I thought about what was waiting on the other side, France. My new chapter, beginning it with a new person, a life I couldn't fully picture yet, but it could feel pulling at me like a current. And sitting in the middle of that empty apartment, I felt like the full paradox of it. Well, mind you, it wasn't really fully empty yet, but it was pretty darn close. I was ready to go. Yet I was also heartbroken to leave. Both things can coexist, completely true at the exact same time. And I think that paradox, being ready and heartbroken simultaneously, might be one of the truest signs that you are making the right decision. Because if it were easy, if there were nothing to grieve, it would mean you hadn't really built anything worth leaving. It would mean the life you were walking away from hadn't mattered, but it had mattered. It mattered enormously. That's why it hurt. And I want to say something to the woman listening who is somewhere in that same in-between place. Maybe you haven't made the decision yet. Maybe you're sitting with it. Maybe you're terrified. That grief you feel when you imagine leaving means you shouldn't go. And I'm going to share with you right now, it doesn't mean that. The grief is not a stop sign. The grief is proof that you have lived fully in the chapter you're in, and living fully in one chapter is exactly what makes you ready for the next one. If you imagine your life exactly as it is right now, your home, your routines, the gadgets and things you have in your drawers, your familiar roads, and you imagine leaving it, what comes up? Not the logistics, the feeling. Is it relief? Is it grief? Is it both? Fear? What does that tell you? Now, I want to talk about fear, because that fear is always there, right? Not the fear of unknown. I want to be precise about this because I think it really matters. It wasn't really fear of what was coming. It was something more specific than that. It was the fear of losing the familiar. As I mentioned, I knew those roads like the back of my hand. I knew the grocery store, the aisles to get my favorite snack or meal. I knew how to navigate that city with my eyes closed, that area. I knew the shortcut to go get, around traffic. I knew certain people that worked at the local grocery store or the Starbucks that I lived by, and the way that they made my order. Like, they knew me and I knew them. And I was about to trade all of that for a place where I knew nothing. And it's actually kind of funny because I did this before, back in whatever year that was, when I left to South Korea. Like, I was in a moment where I was ready for change. I wanted to do something different, and I literally did not do any research, I remember, at that time, and I just went on the plane and I went to South Korea without knowing anything. And here I was again, where I would begin and be a beginner at the same basic things, where navigating a grocery store would require concentration and to understand the different brands and logos and understanding French, and where, if I got lost, I'd have to ask and know the basic language in which I was still learning. And that scared me more than I expected to. Not because I doubted the decisions, but because familiarity is its own kind of comfort. Even when the familiar thing isn't making you happy, even when you've outgrown it completely, there's something in us that would rather stay in the unknown discomfort than risk the unknown possibility. And I had to have a very different conversation with that part of myself. And I was like, I hear you. I know you're scared. I know this feels like a loss. I know you're grieving. I know that you're not wanting to let go of your routines and the things that you know. And I'm not going to tell you that it isn't, but because it is, we are losing the familiar, and the familiar has been good to us. But staying in something just because it's familiar, just because we know the roads, is not a reason. It's just fear wearing the costume of practicality, and we are not going to let fear make the decision for us. And then I got on the plane. Not because the fear went away, it didn't, but because I had decided that the pull toward my next life was louder than the fear of leaving the current one, and that was enough. What is the most familiar thing about your current life that you are most afraid to leave behind? Not the bigger or most important, the most familiar. The thing you know so well, you don't even notice it anymore. And what would it mean to discover that you could build that familiarity somewhere new? I want to close with something simple. You are allowed to be exactly excited and terrified at the same time. You are allowed to be ready to leave and heartbroken to go. You are allowed to love the life you've built and know in your bones that it's time to build a different one. Those things are not contradictions. In fact, they are not signs that you're confused or making a mistake or not ready. They are the signs that you are fully human and fully alive and standing at the exact threshold that growth requires. The conversation I had with myself in that time, in that beautiful apartment, the one I sat with grief and the excitement and the fear and the knowing all at once, the conversation changed me, not because I resolved anything, not because I found certainty or clarity or a neat answer, but because I stopped trying to feel one thing. I stopped trying to filter. I stopped trying to suppress. I stopped trying to be either fully excited or fully at peace or fully sure. I let myself feel all of it. And in letting all of it be there, I found something steadier than certainty. You know what I found? Trust. Trust in myself. Trust in the pull. Trust that a woman who had built one beautiful life was absolutely capable of building another. And that is what I want for you today. Not certainty, not a sign. Because let me go on a tangent about the sign. I was talking to a friend the other day about this. And it was about like coincidences and whatnot. And it's like, okay, God, or okay, universe, give me a sign, show me a sign. And I think that really comes down to, if you want a sign, you're going to find it. If you look for it, it's going to find you. You're going to perceive and see the world in the way that you want based on what you want to get out of. Right? So, going back to what I was saying. Not certainty, not a sign, not a perfect plan or a guarantee that it will all work out, just this. The permission to feel everything you're feeling without making any of it mean you shouldn't go. The grief is real. The fear is real. The love you have for the life you're leaving is real. And so is the woman on the other side of it, the one who is waiting for you in a city you haven't moved to yet, in a morning you haven't woken up to yet, in a version of yourself you haven't met yet. She's real too. And she's so worth the grief of getting to her. That was episode 7. Thank you for being in the car with me today, and we'll see you in the next commute.